in the black community, we're very, very hesitant to talk about mental health, especially mental health that makes you do things to yourself. It's almost like people are embarrassed by it, they're ashamed.
Right, so it says here, Derek Owosu is a writer, poet and podcaster from North London. Derek edited and contributed to SAFE on Black British men reclaiming space. That is this book. This week's episode of Modern Masculinity, we're going to be speaking to Derek about his journey through learning about his diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and going through the system. He's just got a really important kind of perspective that I don't think we hear from enough. And I just think it's really important, given the kind of context that we're living in, that we have a real conversation that goes into some of the more difficult things to confront and discuss around mental health. We are going to be talking about suicide and self-harm and sensitive issues like that. So if you're feeling particularly kind of vulnerable and like not wanting to watch that, then I'd suggest maybe clicking off today. But you could just stick with us because I think that this is a positive conversation. I really hope that it connects with people watching this. There are lots of different reasons as to why I want to talk to you, but I think it's probably important to kind of just give a bit of background about what your story is.
You know, I think I've had BPD since I was 11 or something like that. But it always presented itself in different ways, and I just started thinking I was just a bit quirky. Started thinking I was a bit odd. I thought, oh, I'm just an impulsive person, or I'm just not very good at relationships, because that's where it manifests itself. And then it got to the point where I was just like drinking a lot, and I was just, you know, I was crying a lot, and things happened on social media that really kind of messed me up. And then that's when I started self-harming at I think I was like 29 or something. I eventually started taking medication after a couple of suicide attempts. And I just had to make a decision, you know, either I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. And luckily I chose to try and, you know, take the medication.
So you reached out to the GP, you went to go see the GP, all right, and they gave you some medication. So what was your kind of next point of interaction with like the mental health care services?
Another day I just kind of decided that, you know, I was going to take my life. And I went to Waterloo, and it's right opposite, I think it's St Thomas and Guy Hospital. I don't know what I was thinking and what changed my mind. Not even changed my mind, but just gave me a little kind of kick to turn in the other direction, but I did. I went to A&E and I was like, I've been self-harming and I've been thinking about, you know, taking my life. And then they saw me, spoke to me. They had like an in-house psychologist who came to talk to me. They said that a bed has opened up at one of the psychiatric wards, and they're going to send me there. And so I went there about 12 o'clock in the morning. There was a doctor and a nurse filling out the paperwork, and there was one he was a nurse, and he was black, and he was just staring at me the whole time while I was filling out the paperwork, while the doctor was asking me questions, and I was telling him about my recent diagnosis of BPD. And then they told me to leave the room and sit down in the waiting area. So I was sitting in the waiting area. And then the nurse came up to me, sat next to me. He was like, "You're Ghanaian, aren't you?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm Ghanaian too." I was like, "Okay, cool." And he's like, "I can't let you come in here." And I was like, "Why? Why not?" He was like, "I can see everybody in here and I can see you." He's like, "If you come in here, you're going to get worse. So I'm going to tell the doctor that you don't want to come in here. You will say that you will go to a recovery house. There's still nurses there. You have your own room. They give you your medication, so on, but you have the freedom to leave and come back."
So it's like flexible support, basically.
It's more flexible, yeah. So yeah, and I was in the recovery house, I think maybe for like 2 months or something like that.
Like how impactful was it and how important was it that you met him and that he was Ghanaian and that he told you not to go to recovery house? It sounded like that at the time, it could have gone either way.
I don't know what the word is. I don't know if I can say grateful or anything like that. But I've met a lot of people along this journey that I've been on that have been very helpful to me and just really wanting the best for me, you know. Because the psychologist, when he first came in and saw me, he was just like, "I've been doing this for about 25 years and you're the first black man I've ever seen come through here with self-harm scars in your arms." And I was like, "Well, okay, but that doesn't mean it's not happening." You know, I was like, they're just not coming through here. They're hiding it or whatever. So he was always like really helpful and really, really nice.
But this was a white...
This was a white psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist, okay.
Yeah.
You're saying that there are other black men who have suffered from the same things as you. I'm aware of that. But why do you think it is that then, for him to say that in London is quite shocking?
Because of masculinity, essentially. Because they don't want people to know what they're going through. Or they think they can get through it. Like I thought I could get through it.
But when you say masculinity, that's like all men. We're specifically, you're saying that what this psychologist said was, I don't see black men.
There's different kinds of masculinities, and it affects different people from different cultures in different ways. It manifests in different kinds of ways. In the black community, we're very, very hesitant to talk about mental health, especially mental health that makes you do things to yourself. It's almost like people are embarrassed by it, they're ashamed. Family as well. Family doesn't really encourage conversation. You know, if a lot of people will, I think would agree with this, that, you know, West African dads don't really open up that much, especially like kind of like, I say working class West African dads, especially about mental health. I can't imagine an older West African man of that generation openly talking about his mental health or talking about how he used to self-harm when he was 30. No way. Couldn't imagine it. You know, so we adopt that. Again, it's something we can't imagine, then we struggle to do it ourselves. And also as well, because of the sexism in medicine, borderline personality disorder is usually diagnosed to women, and even self-harming as well, something that people associate with women. The masculinity just again jumps out because they're thinking, why am I doing? I'm a man. Why am I doing this? Why am I cutting myself and this kind of thing? And they don't want to face up to the truth that, you know, they're sick.
One of the things I find really interesting in these conversations around mental health is the question of like experience and the question of biology. There's the predispositions that people might have towards certain kind of mental health issues, but there's also the kind of real life triggers that happen, right? The traumas that people experience or the things that happen to people growing up. So I thought it would be important to ask Derek a little bit about his background and what his life was like before he got given this diagnosis.
You know, when I was in the recovery house, lucky for me, one of the nurses there was actually a specialist in borderline personality disorder. And there's not many of those around. When I sat down with her, she was just like, tell me your life story. So I started off and I was just like, well, you know, I was born in London. My mum was obviously a Ghanaian immigrant, came over, she couldn't afford to look after me, so she put me in foster care. And she was like, right, okay.
Is that quite a common thing that can happen?
Apparently so. Apparently, yeah, a lot of kids who were in foster care later in life develop borderline personality disorder or bipolar. And she says it comes down to something called attachment theory. I don't know much about it, but she's just kind of like, when a baby is born, it attaches to the mother, smell, touch, everything. Taking a baby away from that at like 5 months old, the baby goes through a sort of trauma. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously I developed a relationship with my foster mum, who was a white middle class older woman. And then I was taken away from her by my biological mum. That was I felt that trauma because I remember I cried for about 4 weeks. Hated my mum, wouldn't talk to her, I was just screaming and crying for that entire time.
When you first come in the room and then you talk about borderline personality disorder, it sounds very clinical. And I think that what often does scare people is that they can't understand things, they can't make the connections. Yeah. And like you said, when they do make the connections, then it feels like there's blame somewhere.
When I first started self-harming, I think that's when my mum really panicked. And she was just like, what is happening? So I was hiding it from her for a long time. So what the NHS did, which was, again, amazing, is that they found a Ghanaian doctor who worked with people with mental health issues, found him and sent him to my house to explain to my mum in Tree, which is the language she spoke, exactly what was happening with me.
Really?
Yeah, so that she could try and get her head around it. So he came, he spoke to my mum, they were talking for a long time, you know, cracking jokes, and he was just really, it was great. And then after that day, my mum got it. She completely got
Wow.
it. So like, for example, if she could feel an argument was coming and I was being very sensitive, she'll be like, okay, let's stop. Even though she was angry, she'll be like, let's stop. Derek, I'm sorry. Because she could see I was about to present, she'll be like, stop. After that doctor came to my house, she understood everything.
What have you found it to be like in terms of your relationships now, especially your friendships and stuff?
Yeah.
Do you find that you've been able to talk about it to your friends? And I'm specifically interested about your black male friends.
So a lot of my friends who are black men, you know, when I was really presenting and my behavior was just erratic, it was just very, very crazy and irrational, I was just doing mad things, scaring everybody and stuff like that, they distanced themselves from me. And I don't blame them. Nobody should have to deal with somebody who's going through something. But then I've got like my other friends who, like my school, what do they call my day ones? My day ones, yeah. Who, some of them were even like, I knew there was something wrong with you, boy. They're just like, I knew something was up. When I'm moving irrational, one of them will say, yo, D, I don't want you to mess up your relationships with people. Don't want you to, you know, break bridges that you don't need to. Chill. You need to chill. Like, they do that with me. I've got one friend, he doesn't hear from me for a couple of days. He turns up at my house. He'll knock on my door. I remember early in the morning, I came downstairs. He's at my door disheveled. He's like, Derek, you left the group chat. You've deleted Instagram. What's going on? I was like, I'm fine. He's like, okay, cool. All right, see you later. You just can't joke. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, they kind of, and I'm not saying that people should have to do that, but I mean, what is a 10-minute drive if you know there's a potential that you're never going to see your friend again? The way the culture is at the moment, and when I say culture, I'm talking specifically about online culture mainly, and how that obviously affects our lives in real life. But there is this culture of individualism which makes me feel so sick. Like, kind of like, I'm not your therapist. We need more compassion, more empathy. Just listening to somebody talk doesn't make you their therapist. Listening is very productive. That's why Samaritans exist. I made the mistake of thinking Samaritans were going to help me in a really practical way that I could see, observable way. I called them, I was talking to them, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to kill myself. And they were just listening. I was like, I hung up the phone.
What were you wanting them to do?
I don't know.
Send a SWAT team
to
to
save
your
me
house
or something, yeah.
and save you, okay.
And afterwards I realized they're a listening service, and there's so much benefit, you know, in that.
There are some people that go the other way and they want to save people, and you can't save people.
You can't save. I don't think it's about even saving you. It's just kind of like, I'll be there for you as much as I can.
And that is real. That is like...
Yeah, your partner as well. I think that's the prevailing narrative that I see on social media, is that your partner is not your therapist. Which is such a bizarre statement, because we know that men don't open up. We know that men do not open up about their mental health. So when they finally do, we say, I'm not your therapist.
Yeah, but that's because we've grown up with like toxic
exactly.
images of relationships.
We all have. Yeah, we all have. I think people who say I'm not a therapist, they don't know anything about therapy, or they've never been to therapy, because just listening to somebody talk, seeing them cry perhaps, it doesn't make you their therapist. Do you know what I mean? And look, seeing another man cry is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, men and women, because of the way we've been socialized. Seeing it makes you think, whoa, something big must have happened to get this person here in front of me crying their eyes out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I saw my grandma passed in January, and I went home, I saw my dad cry, and I was like, I sit in interviews, or I sit with friends and people my age, I see them cry. When I saw my dad cry, I was like, I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Exactly. And this is it. Look, man, I think if COVID has shown us anything, is that we're all connected, we're all in this together. We can help each other. We can't save people, but we can try and help. There's nothing wrong with trying to help. There's nothing wrong with trying to be there for somebody when you feel like they need it. Do you know what I mean?
So I hope you don't think I lied to you, and that you did find something positive in the conversation I had with Derek. I know that personally, I have found so many positive things through all the conversations I've had. And I'll be honest, this year has been so hard to get anything done. Just so difficult, and I really want to be able to give you guys more and be able to get out and talk to people and just show a bit more of what's going on with people. And I just want to say, if you're going through a rough time, you are not alone, and there are people out there. You know, there was Rufus in the last video that I spoke to. There was another video I did with dads where there were WhatsApp groups where people like talking to each other. You know, I've spoken to other people that have found, you know, that nurses and doctors have been extremely helpful and changed the course of their lives. There are people out there, if you want to reach out. If you want to recommend something that I could do if we crack on with a series 4, then you can get me on Twitter or Instagram. My handle is Imani Amrani. And just apart from that, please just take care of yourselves and hopefully see each other soon. Calm. Yeah, calm.